Tensions between Canada and the US are changing energy prices, supply chains, and defense cooperation. Will these shifts in policy start affecting how much you, each month, and the future of American pay jobs? In a sharp turn of events, the province of Ontario, Canada, has imposed an extra 25% charge on electricity exported to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, directly responding to recent U.S. trade tariffs. According to the Globe and Mail, this fee equals around $10 per megawatt hour, piling up an estimated $300,000 to $400,000 Canadian dollars per day in new costs. For the 1.5 million American households and businesses relying on Canadian electricity, this translates into about $69 added to their monthly bills. Residents and small businesses across the Midwest are already feeling the squeeze, with local power authorities warning of rate increases this summer. For many, this unexpected rise comes at a time when household budgets are already stretched by inflation and rising costs. The abrupt change has also forced state governments in New York, Michigan, and Minnesota to enter direct talks with Canadian officials. Since federal-level negotiations in Washington have yet to yield any relief, if U.S.-Canada trade disputes continue, Midwest states could see further price hikes and possible disruptions in their energy supply. Experts warn that local energy providers may need to seek alternative, more expensive sources, with families and small businesses likely bearing the brunt of these changes. Without a quick diplomatic solution, power interruptions and volatility could persist through the year. Analysts also warn that ripple effects may reach food production and essential public services, which depend on stable energy costs to operate. Volkswagen has confirmed an unprecedented investment of 20 billion Canadian dollars, roughly 14.8 billion US dollars, to construct a major electric vehicle battery gigafactory in St. Thomas, Ontario. The project, highlighted by CBC News, positions Canada as a leading player in the North American EV industry. But notably, not a single US plant was included in this multi-billion-dollar plan. The Ontario government has lauded this as a game changer for Canadian manufacturing, projecting the facility will generate thousands of local jobs and attract a web of suppliers and startups. U.S. industry groups have voiced disappointment, noting that federal incentives and trade policy may be failing to keep top-tier investments on American soil. U.S. automakers, particularly in the Midwest, are now facing a growing shortage of essential EV parts like batteries and cells. This supply gap has contributed to an 18% drop in manufacturing output across the region and led to furloughs and job cuts in key auto towns such as Detroit and Toledo. For many families, the uncertainty around job security and economic stability is becoming a daily concern. U.S. auto plants risk falling further behind global competitors. With the U.S. increasingly left out of the North American EV supply chain, domestic carmakers may struggle to meet both production and environmental targets. Experts predict that unless new incentives or partnerships emerge, thousands more jobs could be at risk, and American-made EVs may become less competitive on the world stage. Unless government policies change to attract similar investments, the U.S. may lose its edge in advanced automotive technologies, impacting both national economic growth and progress toward climate goals. Analysts urge increased coordination between federal and state governments to reclaim lost ground. Canada is reevaluating its $19 billion deal to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets, a contract long considered a boost for the U.S. defense industry. Reports from Reuters show that Ottawa is now considering alternative aircraft, such as France's Rafale or Sweden's Gripen, amid a new wave of defense and technology agreements signed with the European Union. The Canadian government states that its goal is to enhance independence and flexibility in defense procurement, reflecting broader strategic shifts. At the same time, European leaders have welcomed Canada's interest, promising enhanced technology transfers and industrial cooperation. This potential shift has sparked concern among defense workers and contractors, particularly in states like Texas and Missouri, where F-35 components are made. The loss of such a major order could lead to significant job reductions and threatens America's leadership role within NATO. A divided defense market also risks undermining military cohesion among Western allies, raising questions about shared security in an uncertain world. If Canada ultimately cancels or reduces its F-35 order, the U.S. defense sector may see shrinking revenues and layoffs. Military analysts predict more allied nations could seek defense independence, making it harder for the U.S. to coordinate security priorities abroad. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, one of the world's largest pension funds, is scaling back investments in the United States, signaling a move toward European and Asian markets instead. The Wall Street Journal reports that this cautious approach comes as U.S. markets face rising volatility and uncertainty. Canadian financial experts say this decision reflects a desire to diversify assets and protect against currency fluctuations. The trend is supported by new data showing an uptick in cross-Atlantic investment deals and growing interest from Canadian funds in emerging Asian infrastructure projects. As trusted partners like Canada reduce their U.S. exposure, the dollar's long-held status as the world's reserve currency could erode. For Americans, this shift means potential challenges in keeping energy and supply chains running smoothly, particularly in border states. Without strong federal solutions, local communities may need to find their own ways to adapt and secure essential goods and services. If these investment trends persist, the U.S. could face increased borrowing costs and a more competitive global market for essential resources. Economists suggest Americans should prepare for a world where economic resilience and local problem-solving are more important than ever. Analysts warn that the recent moves by Canada signal deeper shifts in trade, energy, and security that could reshape American lives in the months ahead. In the face of these forecasts, it may be time for American citizens to stay informed, advocate for stronger local policies, and rethink how we secure our future. Canada has suspended its F-35 contract. The U.S. dollar is depreciating. International investors are withdrawing capital, and the Federal Reserve is being drawn into an unprecedented political confrontation. Is the United States, intentionally or not, steering itself away from its traditional role at the center of the global economy? And who stands to benefit from this shift? On June 23, 2025, Canada and the EU signed a Security and Defense Agreement, SSGO, expanding cooperation in the production of MGCS tanks and FCAS fighter jets. The agreement also allows Canadian companies to participate in the EU's joint procurement program, worth €150 billion. Concurrently, on June 11, 2025, the Canadian government announced a temporary suspension of its contract to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets from Lockheed Martin, valued at $19 billion Canadian dollars, equivalent to $13.29 billion US dollars, and confirmed that a final review would be completed before the end of summer 2025. The suspension of the F-35 order directly affects Lockheed Martin's manufacturing facilities in Texas and Georgia, where thousands of jobs linked to the assembly and production lines are potentially at risk. Additionally, this development could unsettle a key American partner in the North American Defense Alliance, potentially impacting the credibility of the defense industrial base and future coordination in weapons supply chains. These moves suggest Canada is gradually diversifying its procurement sources and reducing its dependency on U.S. military hardware, a sensitive shift amid ongoing trade and political tensions with Washington. The administration of President Trump is pushing forward a new and controversial provision known as Section 899, part of the budget legislation titled One Big Beautiful Bill. The proposal includes a tax of up to 20% on USD-denominated income earned by foreign investors from countries deemed to impose unfair taxation on American businesses. Initially set at 5%, the tax rate may gradually increase annually until it reaches the 20% cap, according to reporting from The Guardian on June 16, 2025. This measure is designed as a financial countermeasure against countries that maintain digital taxes or trade barriers targeting U.S. technology and service corporations. The potential impact is significant. According to data from the U.S. Department of Treasury and the Global Business Alliance, nearly $40 trillion in foreign financial assets held in the United States could be affected if the provision is enacted. An analytical report from GBA indicates that full implementation of Section 899 could result in the loss of up to 360,000 jobs and a decline of approximately $55 billion in annual GDP. This would be due to reduced investment and capital flight from U.S. markets. International investors, particularly from Europe, Canada, and Japan, have expressed deep concern during negotiations over the F-35 program, strategic mineral agreements, and technology investment channels. From a macroeconomic standpoint, taxing foreign capital flows could lower demand for U.S. Treasury bonds. This would force Washington to raise interest rates to attract investors, thereby increasing borrowing costs across the economy. American households may feel the effect through higher mortgage rates, more expensive auto loans, and costlier consumer credit. In an economic climate that requires stability, any policy that risks undermining investor confidence may have far-reaching consequences for household finances, credit markets, and everyday consumption. The U.S. dollar index has dropped to its lowest level since February 2022, with a decline of over 10% in 2025 alone, nearing a three-year low, per Reuters. The fall persists despite geopolitical tensions, such as the Iran-Israel conflict, suggesting the dollar's diminishing role as a safe haven. Key drivers include President Trump's public criticism of Federal Reserve policy targeting Chairman Powell and indicating potential leadership changes favoring lower rates. Combined with legal and political uncertainty, international investors are retreating from U.S. assets, weakening confidence in the dollar and Treasury bonds. Consequently, import prices have surged. With the weaker dollar raising conversion costs, Americans are seeing higher energy, food, and pharmaceutical prices, tightening household budgets amid persistent inflation and slow recovery in purchasing power. Federal Reserve. Chairman Jerome Powell insists that interest rate decisions remain data-driven and free from political influence. Nonetheless, President Trump continues public criticism, calling Powell low IQ and suggesting early removal. Some Fed officials, including Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman, support rate cuts to spur growth. Though inflation remains elevated, while markets expect possible rate cuts by summer, most Federal Open Market Committee members, including Powell, remain cautious. 7 out of 12 are not forecasting a rate change in 2025. Morgan Stanley warns that premature Fed concessions to political pressure could damage market trust in inflation control and long-term stability. Political interference could weaken the dollar's status, raise interest rates, and directly affect mortgages, auto loans, and consumer lending. Monetary instability risks financial market volatility and reduced consumer business confidence, both vital to economic recovery. This standoff reflects deeper friction, the White House urging cuts to boost growth. While the Fed stresses caution to manage inflation, it raises important questions about maintaining balance between short-term momentum and long-term resilience. Tensions between the Trump administration and both international and domestic actors are shaping a volatile economic landscape. Canada's halt of the $13.29 billion USD F-35 deal and new defense pact with the EU threaten U.S. defense jobs and challenge its leadership in global supply chains. Meanwhile, the Section 899 proposal targeting foreign-held USD assets has sparked global investor anxiety. With risks of capital flight and rising borrowing costs, the U.S. dollar's steep decline, despite global crises, signals eroding trust in its role as a safe haven currency. Simultaneously, pressure on the Federal Reserve from the Trump administration raises concerns over the institution's independence, essential for monetary stability and inflation control. Together, these developments strain market confidence, raise living costs, and test the United States' economic standing on the world stage. Former President Trump's new steel tariff has ignited a major shift in North American trade and defense relations. Could this be the beginning of a global supply chain realignment? On June 4, 2025, former U.S. President Donald Trump enacted a significant increase in tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, raising them from 25% to 50% via executive order. This move, aimed at bolstering domestic industries, particularly impacts Canada, the U.S.'s largest supplier of these metals. Canada supplies nearly half of U.S. aluminum imports and a substantial portion of steel, making it a critical partner in sectors like defense, automotive, and aerospace. The tariff hike has disrupted the integrated supply chains between the U.S. and Canada. American manufacturers, especially in the Midwest, are facing material shortages and increased costs. Industries dependent on Canadian metals are experiencing production delays, leading to potential job losses and higher consumer prices. Economists warn that the increased costs for raw materials are expected to hurt manufacturers and consumers by raising prices on a wide range of goods, from engines to beverage cans. In response to the U.S. tariffs, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a strategic shift in foreign policy, emphasizing stronger ties with Europe. Canada has committed to joining the European Union's Readiness 2030 defense initiative, aiming to enhance military capabilities and reduce reliance on U.S. defense systems. Additionally, Canada is re-evaluating its trade relationships, seeking to diversify its export markets and lessen economic dependence on the U.S. The U.S. risks losing not just a key trade partner, but also one of its closest defense allies. Canada's alignment with European defense and economic structures could diminish U.S. influence in North America and open opportunities for other global powers to strengthen ties with Canada. This realignment may lead to reduced access to Canadian resources and markets for American businesses, potentially impacting sectors ranging from energy to agriculture. The sudden tariff increase has sent shockwaves through U.S. industries reliant on Canadian metals. Manufacturers in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri are reporting immediate challenges, including halted production lines and financial losses. Despite warnings from industry experts about the potential fallout, the tariffs were implemented without a comprehensive legal framework, leading to confusion and uncertainty. The disruption in supply chains is expected to have long-term economic consequences. Businesses may face prolonged recovery periods, increased operational costs, and the need to find alternative suppliers, which could result in higher prices for consumers and potential job cuts in affected industries. For instance, U.S. manufacturers currently meet only about 20% of domestic transformer demand, creating a critical dependency on imports. Lead times have expanded from weeks to 80 to 120 weeks for some equipment, causing project delays of 1 to 2 years in some cases. America is losing billions as foreign tourists disappear, draining a vital piece of the economy. Why are travelers avoiding the United States in growing numbers? In 2025, the U.S. economy is projected to lose approximately $12.5 billion in international visitor spending, with total spending expected to fall to just under $169 billion, from $181 billion in 2024. This decline is attributed to a 9.4% drop in international arrivals, including a 20.2% decrease in visitors from Canada. The downturn has led to empty hotel rooms, canceled flights, and shuttered tour services, signaling a silent collapse with far-reaching consequences. The impact on American workers is significant. Industries once thriving on international guests are now in decline. Job losses are mounting, particularly among hourly wage workers, front desk clerks, cab drivers, tour guides, and cleaning crews. These individuals, heavily reliant on foreign spending, are among the first to feel the economic strain. The World Travel and Tourism Council warns that this downturn could result in the loss of hundreds of thousands of jobs across the U.S. The shift is global. Canada, historically a major source of U.S. visitors, has seen a 20% drop in AIR travel and a 35% decrease in land crossings. This downturn is fueled by opposition to U.S. immigration policies and reports of detentions at borders. China has issued a risk alert for its citizens traveling to the U.S., citing safety concerns amid escalating trade tensions. European countries, and including France and Germany, have also updated their travel advisories, warning citizens about potential risks when visiting the U.S. for local businesses. The disappearance of international tourists is palpable. In Las Vegas, international arrivals have dropped by 7.8%, leading to decreased casino revenues and canceled shows. Hawaii's tourism industry is struggling, with a significant decline in Japanese visitors, who are not projected to return to pre-pandemic levels this decade. In New York City, the forecast for international tourists has been reduced by 17%, equating to 800,000 fewer visitors. Certain regions are nearing a tipping point. Florida's beach resorts are experiencing closures due to the decline in Canadian and European visitors. In Nevada, Las Vegas has seen a 7.8% decrease in visitors, with gaming revenues on the Strip dropping by 4.8%. Hawaii's tourism backbone is under pressure, with Japanese arrivals down by 14.5% compared to the previous year. Airbnb hosts and shuttle services are facing reduced demand. In New York, international tourism is expected to fall by 17%, largely attributed to policy changes and international perceptions. Behind these statistics are American families, from waitstaff in Orlando to museum docents in Manhattan. Individuals are confronting layoffs, reduced hours, and growing uncertainty. The decline in international tourism reverberates through communities, affecting livelihoods and local economies in New York City alone. The tourism sector employs over 400,000 people, and the projected drop in visitors could jeopardize many of these jobs. Ford's strategic pivot to Canada for electric vehicle production has stirred political tensions and economic concerns in the U.S. How will this cross-border shift reshape the American automotive landscape? Ford Motor Company has announced a significant investment of over $1.8 billion to transform its Oakville assembly plant in Ontario into a hub for electric vehicle, or EV, production. This move includes plans to build vehicles and assemble battery packs on site. marking a strategic shift in Ford's manufacturing operations. This transition has led to concerns in U.S. industrial regions. In Michigan, Ford temporarily laid off 600 non-striking workers at its Wayne assembly plant, citing adjustments in production schedules. Additionally, Cleveland-Cliffs, a major steel supplier, announced layoffs of over 1,200 workers in Michigan and Minnesota, attributing the decision to decreased automotive demand influenced by shifting manufacturing strategies. In response to Ford's investment in Canada, President Donald Trump has threatened to impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, excluding energy products, which would be subjected to a 10% tariff. The administration aims to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and encourage stronger Canadian border enforcement. Such tariffs could lead to increased prices for vehicles imported from Canada, affecting American consumers. The automotive industry warns that these measures may disrupt the integrated North American supply chain, potentially leading to higher costs and reduced availability of certain vehicle models in the U.S. market. Canada has proactively positioned itself as an attractive destination for EV manufacturing through clear policies and substantial incentives. The federal SEIZES EV program offers rebates of up to $5,000 for eligible zero-emission vehicles, while provinces like Quebec provide additional incentives, with some drivers earning up to $13,000 per electric vehicle. These incentives have attracted significant investments from automakers, including Ford's $1.2 billion manufacturing plant for EV battery material in Quebec. The U.S. automotive industry faces increased competition as manufacturers consider relocating operations to benefit from Canada's favorable policies, potentially leading to further job losses and reduced investment in American manufacturing facilities. The shift in manufacturing has led to disruptions in the U.S. automotive retail sector. Ford dealerships are experiencing inventory shortages, leading to reduced sales, and in some cases, closures. For instance, TriStar Ford in Pennsylvania announced its closure after 10 years, citing challenges related to inventory and federal EV mandates. The closure of dealerships and layoffs in manufacturing have broader implications for American communities. Local economies suffer as jobs are lost and consumer confidence declines. The automotive industry's restructuring underscores the need for strategic policies to support domestic manufacturing and mitigate adverse effects on workers and communities. A new $25 trillion trade alliance among ASEAN, China, and Gulf nations is reshaping global commerce. As the U.S. steps back from multilateral deals, is a parallel economic system emerging? At the recent ASEAN GCC China Summit in Kuala Lumpur, leaders announced a strategic trade alliance encompassing ASEAN, the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, and China. Collectively, these regions represent a GDP of nearly $25 trillion and a population of approximately 2.15 billion people. This alliance aims to deepen economic integration through initiatives like the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area, ACFTA 3.0, and a proposed China-GCC Free Trade Agreement. China's significant investments in infrastructure, including high-speed rail, logistics, and 5G networks, are central to this collaboration. The formation of this bloc could shift global trade dynamics, potentially affecting U.S. exports and influence in these regions. American businesses may face increased competition and need to adapt to new trade standards and practices established by this alliance. Saudi Arabia and China are advancing discussions to price oil sales in Chinese yuan, challenging the U.S. dollar's dominance in global energy markets. Additionally, TotalEnergies has completed its first liquefied natural gas, LNG, transaction with China, settled in yuan. China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, is gaining traction as an alternative to the SWIFT network. facilitating yuan-denominated transactions and reducing reliance on Western financial systems. A move away from the dollar in global energy trade could lead to decreased demand for the U.S. currency, potentially impacting exchange rates, and increasing borrowing costs. American consumers might face higher prices for imported goods and energy. Since 2017, the U.S. has not entered into any new comprehensive trade agreements. In contrast, China is actively pursuing and updating multiple trade deals, including ACFTA 3.0 and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. Canada and Mexico are also diversifying their trade relationships, seeking stronger ties with Asia-Pacific nations to reduce dependence on the U.S. market. The U.S.'s absence from new trade agreements may limit market access for American exporters, potentially affecting job growth and economic competitiveness. Consumers could face higher prices due to tariffs and reduced availability of foreign goods. China is promoting a soft power approach by exporting its digital infrastructure and governance models through initiatives like the Digital Silk Road. Projects like Vision 2045 aim to harmonize economic regulations across ASEAN, China, and GCC countries. This strategy could lead to the development of an alternative global economic system, less influenced by Western norms and institutions. The rise of parallel economic systems may challenge U.S. leadership in setting global standards, potentially isolating American businesses from emerging markets and new technological frameworks.